Let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're conducting a sort of psychological autopsy on something that probably seems incredibly simple on the surface, but is actually one of the most manipulative behavioral tools ever engineered. We're talking about the rule books of tabletop games. We aren't just going to read them like instructions today. We are going to deconstruct them like psychological cages, built by designers to rigorously test our minds, our emotional resilience, and even our deepest evolutionary instincts.
To really grasp the severity of this psychological trap, listen to this raw distress from a player talking about the hit game Ark Nova. They said they were, quote, praying to the deck gods. Now that isn't just everyday frustration, that is genuine cognitive distress. It perfectly captures that agonizing, helpless feeling of losing control over your own resources.
And that leads us to the central mystery of this entire explainer. Why on earth do we play games that are mathematically engineered to make us suffer? Why do designers deliberately force us to sever our emotional attachments to hard-earned resources, using mechanics like the hand size limit and the discard phase? What is really happening beneath the surface of the cardboard?
Section 1. The illusion of control. What people see versus what is actually happening.
Think about it. When you hold a hand of cards, you naturally perceive it as a symbol of power, right? It feels like safety. It feels like endless potential. But actually, that's a total illusion. As humans, we have this hardwired evolutionary instinct to hoard resources to ensure our survival. We desperately crave infinite options. But the discard phase? That is a highly calculated mechanism specifically designed to weaponize our desire for abundance against us.
So what happens if we let the primitive human brain have its way? What if a game just completely removes all the limits? Well, the psychological result is a phenomenon known as cognitive overchoice. When presented with infinite options, the human brain simply crashes. It completely overloads, resulting in total paralysis and extreme decision fatigue.
In fact, in one documented playtest, a designer actually tried removing the hand limit entirely, and the result was an absolute psychological disaster. The sheer volume of choice created what they clinically called high mental maintenance and continuous reading fatigue. Players were just sitting there waiting endlessly for others to decide. The human mind literally couldn't handle the freedom. It turns out the cage of a hand limit is absolutely necessary to save us from ourselves.
Section 2. The architecture of scarcity. Let's catalog the designer's weapons.
Notice how different game systems engineer this scarcity in completely different ways. In Magic the Gathering, the discard happens during the cleanup step. This gives you the illusion of mid-turn freedom before suddenly reeling you back in. Pandemic, on the other hand, enforces it immediately, instantly punishing any attempt at hoarding. And then you have Dominion, which forces a total deck clearing, brutally ripping your entire hand away every single turn. You see, these aren't just arbitrary rules. They are highly tuned behavioral algorithms.
But let's dig deeper. Why do games like Magic make you discard at the end of your turn specifically? The answer actually lies in neuroscience and a computer science concept called caching. When you play your turn, the cards in your hand are fresh in your brain's fast memory. They're cached. If a game made you discard after everyone else played, your brain would have flushed that cache, forcing you to painstakingly reevaluate your whole hand from scratch. So discarding immediately minimizes that cognitive friction.
Section 3. The trauma of discarding. We're looking at hidden emotional drivers and loss aversion here.
The second you draw a card, you instantly create a psychological bond with it. This is driven by something called the endowment effect. Basically, we place an irrationally high value on something simply because it is in our hand, because we own it. The game deliberately allows you to form this bond and then mercilessly forces you to break it during the discard phase.
And this escalates into genuine trauma in real-time cooperative systems like Pandemic. Picture this. You receive a vital card from an ally when it's not even your turn, but boom, it pushes you over the strict 7-card limit. The entire game completely pauses. You are forced to instantly discard or play a card right then and there. It's a sudden, traumatic severing of attachment that forces a really painful prioritization of long-term strategy over short-term safety.
Ark Nova, however, weaponizes something even more devious: unpredictable, non-periodic break phases. Imagine sitting there with a tiny hand limit of just 3 cards, constantly risking your long-term combos. The break phase drops out of nowhere and forces devastating cognitive compromises. This unpredictability induces this baseline, constant resource anxiety. You're perpetually on edge, wondering exactly when the system will force you to execute a card you've been carefully nurturing.
Now, some players absolutely hate this, but others unconsciously understand its dark necessity. As one player pretty bluntly put it, playing without the hand limit is like learning to ride a bike without ever taking the training wheels off. The pain actually forces efficiency. The limitation forces cognitive adaptation.
Section 4. Collaborative stress tests, power dynamics, and social engineering.
When you look at competitive systems like Malifaux, players uncover a brutal competitive truth: the hand attack. Forcing opponents to burn cards from their hand is actually a highly calculated psychological strike. It's almost always more devastating than inflicting direct damage, because you aren't just hurting their characters on the board, you are literally destroying their future potential and draining their mental resources.
Consider the sheer social manipulation in a game like Mage Knight. You might carefully hoard your cards, managing your resources perfectly. But then, your opponent rapidly blows through their deck and suddenly declares the round over. You have to forfeit your turn, entirely trapped holding a hand of unplayed, useless potential. They haven't just beaten your characters, they've used the game's pacing mechanics to socially engineer your defeat. Which brings us to Section 5, the mathematics of mortality. This is the absolute deepest truth of the discard phase.
Let's talk about the massive tactical survival game, Gloomhaven. In this game, your hand of cards isn't a spell book or an inventory. The cards represent your literal physical stamina. Discarding here isn't just a tactical choice. It is a chilling simulation of existential dread and physical degradation. Every single time you play, your hand gets smaller. You are slowly dying.
49. Look at this number for a second. 49 is the absolute maximum number of turns a Gloomhaven player can survive with a 14-card starting hand, assuming flawless play and never losing a card prematurely. It is a hard, unyielding mathematical cap on your lifespan.
What we are looking at here is a map of inescapable decay. If you play just one powerful lost card early, your lifespan plummets from 49 turns down to 43. Play too early, you're down to 38. If you get greedy and play a lost card every cycle, you will drop dead in just 28 turns. The discard phase here isn't just a rule in a book, it is a ruthless executioner constantly reminding you that your time is running out.
Section 6. Engineering human behavior. Let's look at the ultimate power dynamic between designer and player.
Ultimately, the discard phase prevents runaway engine states, it meticulously manages our cognitive load, and it forces the prioritization of long-term strategy over our desire for short-term abundance. The designer uses the hand limit as a necessary psychological cage, one that protects the human brain from its own worst instinct to hoard and essentially forces us into a state of higher strategic evolution.
So the next time you sit down at a table, draw your hand, and feel that inevitable sting of forced scarcity, I want you to ask yourself this: are you playing the game, or is the game actually playing you?